Bill, you spoke briefly about spending cuts that are being discussed in Congress right now, and obviously that is a hot topic as we go into the month of April, and that now we can turn, I think, to the continued showdown in Congress about these spending cuts. Lawmakers have until April 8th, as you know, to pass a new spending plan to avoid a government shutdown. Three issues are really on the table right now, as I think: the continuing resolution, the debt ceiling, and next year's fiscal budget, which lawmakers have aimed to confirm by April 15th. Can you provide some insight about these developments in Congress and also your predictions?
Well, I'll try to provide some insights. Predictions are easy, but they're not necessarily right.
Sure.
So we'll see what the passage of time has to say on the predictions. Let's again take a step back. One of the things that we know is that the U.S. debt deficit is huge. It's close to 10% of GDP, and it's not something that's sustainable, and that's understood by politicians of both the Democratic and Republican parties. Nonetheless, they're in a continual competition with each other for political advantage, and so that leads to different views on how best to deal with the deficit problem over the long run. So we then have, as you mentioned here, these three pieces that are currently in play, but it's very much a political story at the moment, with this intent long run to do something about getting the deficit under control. As I mentioned a moment ago, if stimulus is withdrawn too much, too quickly, it could have a negative effect on the economy, and the Democrats constantly raise that as an issue. The Republicans have focused more on the government is spending in ways that are not helping the economy, and we ought to reduce that spending as quickly as possible, and oh, by the way, that will help the deficit. So let's first of all talk about the continuing resolution. This is for fiscal year 2011, which began on the 1st of October 2010. And so here we are more than 6 months into the fiscal year, and we're still doing continuing resolutions. Normally the process would be that the Congress would adopt a budget resolution by the 15th of April of the year before the fiscal year starts, not the 15th of April the year after the fiscal year starts, okay? And then what the process is the various committees of Congress that have jurisdiction over different parts of the budget would then take that continuing resolution as guidance and actually put together very specific budgets. That's the normal process. So here we are. We do not have the normal process for fiscal year 2011. We've been doing stopgap continuing resolutions. There's been several of them. And as you pointed out, we do have the most recent one expiring on the 8th of April. To further set the stage, the House of Representatives passed a resolution now back in February, several weeks ago, that would have continued funding for the government through the end of the fiscal year with $61 billion in spending cuts. That was not acceptable to the Senate, and so there was not concurrence on the two houses of Congress. So far, there's been two continuing resolutions passed. One reduced spending by $4 billion and another by 6. So we have 10 of that 61 reduced so far. What the administration, President Obama and Senate Democrats are proposing is another $20 billion in cuts, which would take it to a total of 31. That is not acceptable to many of the Republicans who are holding steadfast for the full 61. Mm-hmm. So now you have the stage set potentially for stalemate, and there has been talk about the possibility of government shutdown. Now, government shutdown is not something that could last for very long. It just simply would not be a tolerable situation. But it could occur just as a part of the poker game that's being played here in terms of trying to obtain political advantage. And here's my prediction now. My prediction on the continuing resolution is that it will get resolved, probably short of actually shutting down the government, although it's going to be close, a close call. and that the spending cuts eventually will be somewhere in the total of 40 to 45 billion. So not the 31 that supposedly the president is willing to accept, a little higher than that, but not the 61. Doesn't that sound like sort of a classic compromise?
Certainly, somewhere
might be
in the
logical, so probably that means it won't happen, but that would be my best prediction at this point. Now, let's go on to the second one, the debt ceiling, because that's totally separate, but that has to do with the ability of the U.S. Treasury to borrow money to finance federal spending. And that debt ceiling will get hit sometime in the month of April, probably towards the end of April. That's not the kind of a drop-dead date because the Treasury can deploy a number of different accounting strategies to buy about 60 days of time. And so the real deadline is probably the end of June. But if the budget ceiling is not raised by that time, then you have more than a government shutdown. You have a government that can't pay its bills, and that actually will have financial market implications. So that will not occur either. Somehow there will be a solution before you reach that kind of final hour, but it probably will extend out right to the end of June, or very close to it. There is a move afoot in the Senate, among the 47 Republicans in the Senate, to actually, as a price for increasing the debt ceiling, having a vote on a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. And so we'll see if that transpires. Then the third piece of this is, to go back to the budget process itself, would be to actually meet the April 15th deadline for fiscal year 2012 by passing a resolution. And there is a group of Republicans in the House of Representatives that does want to do that. And I think there's a pretty good chance that the House of Representatives will pass, much less of a chance that the Senate will do anything at this particular point in time. And so my prediction there will be is you will have something very specific on the table from the House, nothing from the Senate, and we'll then see how this game plays out on fiscal 2012 over the next several months. But it is reported that the House will pass a resolution that has significant cuts in spending, but they will also attack entitlements such as Medicaid.